Birdman is one of the greatest movies I've ever seen, period. There are 1,000 different readings of this movie, and that's in no small part because there's a lot of obscurity of what is and isn't reality in this film. Birdman follows the story of former superhero actor Regan Thompson as he tries to adapt Raymond Carver's What We Talk About When We Talk About Love to stage. But in his attempt to be seen as a respected actor, he can't escape his role as Birdman. It also probably doesn't help that he sees Birdman in his head. Or does he? This movie will have you asking that question a lot throughout its runtime. But today I want to look at this film through the lens of superhero movies. I mean, this is a comic book channel after all. But it doesn't help that while this movie follows a former superhero actor, it isn't necessarily about superheroes. Like I said, there's 1,000 different ways to read this movie. But I think this film definitely says something about the superhero genre, so let's get into it. There's definitely a few hints that this movie is saying something about the superhero genre. And while a lesser film would criticize superhero movies altogether, Birdman is doing something far more complex. The movie comments on superhero films at many points. I mean, the film stars Michael Keaton, who's a former Batman actor, Edward Norton, who's a former Hulk actor, and Emma Stone, who is in the Amazing Spider-Man... actually, no, wait. Those movies don't exist. Let's try and forget about those. The movie is also super meta about the superhero genre. When recruiting actors for his play, Regan asks about Michael Fassbender and Jeremy Renner, but his assistant Jake responds that they're both playing superheroes. Regan follows up by saying, they put him in a cape too? But this film brings up these points and doesn't really guide your hand. There's a lot to unpack. While no one in the film actually has superpowers, besides Regan in his head at least, there is a parallel to superpowers in this film, and it's fame. Many of the characters in the film are looking for fame. The whole reason Regan set up this play is so that he can be famous. As his daughter mentions, he isn't doing this because he wants to be seen as a good actor, he's doing this because he wants to be good enough so that he'll be famous again. While he wants to be a good actor, he only wants to act well so the play will perform well. When feeling down about the play, his assistant Jake mentions that Martin Scorsese might be in the crowd, and Regan is full of newfound power. Just like superpowers in the comic book world, fame in the world of Birdman puts you in a world of your own. But for Regan, this is a world of isolation. There's no Darkseid to bring Regan and the Justice League together, or Nick Fury to recruit Regan for the Avengers Initiative in this movie. Regan is fully isolated and alone. And there's plenty of other superhero parallels that we see in this movie. Two of the most important coupled shots in this movie are the images of the dying jellyfish and a fading meteor. From a superhero lens, these shots could represent Regan's origin. The meteor is reminiscent of Superman's rocket crashing into Earth. But the rocket here is fading, also symbolizing an end. And the jellyfish also have an origin/end meaning to them. Like the radioactive spider in Spider-Man, these jellyfish seem to be an origin for Regan. But Regan later mentions that he attempted to kill himself by drowning, and ends up getting stung by a whole bunch of jellyfish. If these shots represent his origin, either being his fame or his first attempt at suicide via the jellyfish, they also represent his inevitable end. The world of fame is also one of isolation for Regan. By not seeking help, his suicide on stage is inevitable. The stings of the jellyfish for Regan are just like the spider bite for Peter Parker, but for Regan they're a reminder of his instability and mental problems, which he chooses to ignore by powering through the play. Another parallel to superheroes is Jake's character, who serves as an almost warped sidekick. Much of the film points to the fact that Regan needs to get out of his world of fame, which equates to superpowers. At the end of the film, when Regan shares a moment with his daughter, we see him at his most happy. Now, whether or not that scene actually happened is a different story, but it is at least real in Regan's head. But Jake keeps Regan stuck in the world of fame. Unlike a sidekick that helps Regan, Jake keeps him in a never-ending battle of crime fighting. Jake only cares that the show must go on. He lies to Regan that the wife of the Prince of Saudi Arabia is in the crowd, just so Regan will focus on the play. But the film juxtaposes this fantasy and fame with an inescapable sense of reality. The camera work, which is full of tracking shots and close-ups, keeps us painfully aware of the reality of the scenes. But at the same time, the camera is willing to pan from room to room, giving us an almost dreamlike quality, not dissimilar from something like Blade Runner. But this isn't a superhero film full of splash pages and grand shots. We are grounded in the reality of the scene, even when the film presents something entirely unrealistic. But this movie doesn't just simply denounce fame or superhero movies. I think if anything, it denounces ego. But again, that might be a bit of a stretch. I think the film definitely tells us to at least be conscious of our egos, though. If the film isn't saying fame is inherently bad, then what is it saying? I think the answer lies in how the film deals with the difference between high and low art. The most obvious example of this is the difference between the former role of Birdman and the current play Regan is working on. But the film suggests the gap between high and low art in this film isn't that large at all. The two forms are blended together in a similar way to how art and reality are blended together in this movie. Regan is very concerned about changing his public perception in the film. But in reality, Regan doesn't care how good the play is. He cares about how popular the play is. He's only concerned with the critical reaction, which to Regan, and presumably many others, equates to greatness. But again and again, the film shows the role of Birdman in the play might be one and the same. Birdman claims to Regan throughout the movie that people only care about post-apocalyptic porn. They want to watch action and violence. They don't care too much about talking. And when Regan kills himself at the end of the play, Birdman's point is proven right. The audience only reacts to Regan's play with praise because of the gratuitous violence. They didn't care about the acting, they only cared about the violence. So if this film says anything about the superhero genre, I think it argues for it, not against it. It doesn't matter whether it's a play based off a critically acclaimed story or the 50th Batman sequel. There's plenty to love in both of these stories. The barrier between high and low art is broken in this movie, but this movie does show the importance of keeping fame and ego in balance. If we fly in the world of superheroes and fame, we will inevitably fall down. It is important to ground ourselves in reality, and not pretend we're in a fantasy. Because even if we create a fantasy to ignore our reality, we are still denying the reality of the situation. A reality that Regan could not cope with. In a world full of average humans, he gave himself superpowers to become better than us. But eventually, he pays the ultimate price for his desire for fame. When it turns out, it is perfectly okay to be average. But that's just one reading of this movie. Let me know what you guys think about Birdman. What did I miss? Because I'm sure I missed something. Does this movie actually critique superheroes? Let me know in the comments below. And if you haven't seen this movie, I highly recommend it. See you guys next time.